I'm sure you've been following this story as closely there as we have up here. What chance a successful rescue, Frank? Good morning.
Good morning. Actually, my confidence level has been increased by an order of magnitude since these reports have come in of banging, particularly because they've been using a naval protocol that's used by submarine survivors of a disabled submarine around the world, in that on the hour and a half hour for 3 minutes, they bang the hull and make as much noise as they can, and the searching forces go quiet for that period. Because normally the searching forces will be transmitting on sonars and sending charges down. Not quite the case here, but it smacks of advice coming from the French former naval officer who's on board, Paul-Henri Najal, who is a former diver, and he would therefore be very familiar with the procedures. So the fact that they're doing this smacks of somebody who understands what the searching forces might be thinking about.
What will the kit be being used that's deployed above the waves?
There'll be sonobuoys. So they don't have any. Probably the best platform to localise these banging noises actually would be a submarine if it was in the area. Because they're sitting there listening in a passive sense all the time, whereas the aircraft have a sort of limited duration, and their buoys don't sit there forever as well. And the sonobuoys are not really optimized for audio; they're really more optimized for the spectrum analysis. However, they are hearing it, and they'll be able to get bearings from it. And if they put a pattern of buoys in, sonobuoys, they'll be able to cross-fix and get a position. What they won't tell them is the depth. But if they're hearing that noise, given the way there's a temperature profile that is pretty standard around the world's oceans, it's sort of the same temperature down to about 180 metres before it drops away very sharply. And where that drops away is called the layer, and noise often can't penetrate through it from either side. So if they're hearing it and they're in that same stratum of water, then that's very encouraging.
You're a submariner. Indeed, you've been a commander. Can you get your head around what the conditions will be like for these 5 people trapped in this tube, 22 foot long, 9 foot wide?
It'd be uncomfortable, particularly if they are on or near the surface. They'll be bobbing around like a cork. It's quite likely that some of them have been seasick. So the atmosphere would be starting to become quite foul. It'd be cool. It might even be quite cold. If they're deep, it'll be very cold.
And darkness, will it be dark, Frank, or will they have some kind of light?
Oh, they'll have light. It depends. Well, it really depends on what the state of the battery is. We don't know what caused them to have the loss of communications, perhaps the loss of propulsion. There's a whole raft of circumstances that could have occurred leading up to this situation. But the fact that they are making some regular noises suggests that there's life there.
Jared Hill joins me again. We spoke to Jared yesterday, CBS News correspondent who's been keeping us abreast of events on this story. I understand, Jared, that the latest thing, clearly the battle is on to find them, but the latest thing is some sounds heard in the search for the submarine.
Yes, Sheila. So this was something that happened essentially overnight out here on the East Coast. It is where one of the Canadian aircrafts that are helping in this search, using their sonar capabilities, detected some sort of sound, some sort of banging is what it's been described as, coming from the area around where they have been searching. Now, the thing with this, though, is that the U.S. Coast Guard has said that they don't know exactly where that came from, whether this was from another vessel in the area, if this was just some of the sounds of the ocean. The Titanic is there. The metal could have been clanging. They don't know what this is, but they have sent the data back to the U.S. Navy to speak with some of the analysts there who really specialize in these ocean noises, to be able to analyze it and see what this might have been so that they can help with this search. Some robotic search equipment did go back over into that area overnight again once they heard these sounds to look at this again, but they didn't come up with anything, at least not yet.
I saw a journalist and scientist, or a science journalist to be precise, speaking on one of our news programmes here in the UK, who had gone down in a more complex submarine, but still he'd gone down to the wreck of the Titanic. And their submarine became trapped behind the propeller of the Titanic, which is huge. And they only had 8 hours worth of oxygen, so obviously had an even tighter schedule. Now, they did have communications, so that makes a huge difference because they could say precisely where they were and all the rest of it. But at least it tells us something about what might happen or might have happened.
Yeah, I think one of the things with this is because so few, relatively speaking, vessels, people have been in this space, there's a lot of possibility for error and there's a lot of possibility for something new to happen with each one of these voyages down. This vessel in particular has taken this trip a number of times, but also there's been some reporting from one of the CBS Sunday Morning correspondents who attempted to go on one of these trips that there are also a lot of times where something goes wrong. And obviously, never it's been to this degree, but it really does showcase just how dangerous of a trip this is. We were talking yesterday, right, about how the people who go on these voyages sign these waivers where on the first page alone it mentions death 3 times, and not just death, but the, possibility of disfigurement or whatever. People can come out of this in a not great situation. So again, showcasing just how dangerous of a trip this is.
And, we talked there at the beginning about the sounds, the noises that have been heard in this search for the submarine. But there is a different kind of noise, isn't there? The online noise about this submarine. People being hopeful, people being hopeless, people being doom mongers, people being judgmental because it's wealthy people who are on board, and all kinds of noise around this story.
That's right. And I think that one of the reasons, at least that we've seen that there's so much conversation with every reporter that I've spoken to, every news station across the United States that I've spoken to about this, is the fact that a lot of people put themselves in this position mentally or try not to put themselves in the position. And there's a lot of thought about, what would I think if I were there? What would it be like if I were there? So it's something that really does hit to a lot of the fears that we have about, being trapped in the ocean, essentially. At these depths, there are some, reportings that say that more people have been in space, more people have been to the moon than have sometimes gone to some of the deepest parts of the ocean here on the Earth. And so there's a lot that is unknown about what's down there.